Andrew Weissman is the former general counsel at the FBI. Lisa Rubin is an MSNBC legal correspondent. Both of them were in the court this week. They've been on your televisions all week, and they both join me now. So, Andrew, I know you tweeted about this earlier, but I just want to start with what we saw during cross-examination of Michael Cohen this week. Todd Blanche basically accused Cohen of inventing a phone conversation with Trump before the 2016 election, accusing him of being a liar, which has been part of their whole strategy. Explain to us what your takeaway is of that, whether it matters or not, and if you think it was bad for the prosecution in that moment.
Great question. So I think that what we're talking about is an October 24th call where it seems very clear that at the very least, two things happened on that call, not one thing. And Michael Cohen had said on direct examination that this was one of many calls where he spoke to the president about the repayment of the Stormy Daniels hush money scheme. And on cross-examination, it was shown that, in fact, at the very least, there was also a conversation that was with Donald Trump's sort of bodyguard or valet or, helper about a harassing phone call. And so this is pretty typical where the defense has found a mistake that was made either by the DA or the witness. And of course, they are going to say, this is a lie. And that's what they should be doing. But, this happens so often in a case where someone makes a mistake and the battleground is it a lie or is it a mistake? And I think you're going to hear that kind of response from the prosecution tomorrow when they do redirect examination. And frankly, I have to say, I think it was a mistake, and it's not the end of the world because there is so much other evidence. And if you were going to lie about something, this would not be the phone call. It's not. A lot of people on air are saying this was a critical call, but I want to make sure everyone understands this is an October 24th call. This is not the critical call. If there was a critical call, it's 2 days later where the phone records make it absolutely clear that Michael Cohen had two lengthy calls with the former president. And that is when he says there was the authorization of the payment. So I think you'll hear that kind of back and forth tomorrow.
Yeah, that's super helpful as you just laid it out. And Lisa, it's impossible to get in the minds of jurors because they're 12 men and women, they're peers. That's how our justice system works. But clearly, as Andrew just laid out, this is sort of their strategy here. If you're the prosecution team and you're preparing for this next week, how do you navigate what Andrew just outlined? I mean, are you worried it's a huge problem? Are you thinking about how to address it in your closing statement? What are you doing in this moment? Or you're not worried about it because there's so much else that was already presented?
I'm slightly worried about it, and I'm not as hair on fire about it as many TV commentators have been, because the documents and other testimony surrounding Michael Cohen's narrative, Jen, are so strong. And so if I'm the prosecution, and by the way, Josh Steinglass has been writing his closing statement for weeks. In fact, as Andrew and others have pointed out, good prosecutors start with their closing statement and move backwards in deciding what their order of proof or how the evidence should come in will look like. But what I would say if I were the prosecutors is, okay, so maybe he didn't talk to Donald Trump when he was talking or calling the bodyguard. Maybe he made a mistake about that. But guess what? He didn't make a mistake about that the defense hasn't presented you with a counter narrative about. They didn't say that the document wasn't signed. They haven't shown you that David Pecker didn't have conversations with Donald Trump about it, including a conversation about repaying Michael Cohen. They haven't shown you that the conversation between Donald Trump, Alan Weisselberg, and Michael Cohen took place, where Trump approved the repayment scheme that Cohen and Weisselberg literally mapped out on a copy of a bank statement for Michael Cohen's LLC that he set up to make the payment. There's just so much other evidence that surrounds Michael Cohen and sort of bolsters him that if I'm the prosecution, yes, I'm worried about that gotcha moment, but I have so much else that I can use to remind the jury that there is no alternative explanation for how events took place other than the central narrative that Michael Cohen has taken them through and that the documents otherwise support.
So this is such an interesting thing to watch, and it was an interesting development of last week. So let's talk about the defense could call witnesses. There's this still rumor hanging out there, which I think is kind of a game, but you guys are the legal experts, that Trump could still testify. So, Andrew, I assume you don't think that's going to happen, and it's a game, but I want to know what you think. And talk to us a little bit about what the strategy is of a defense on whether they're going to call witnesses at all or who they might call.
It's not going to happen.
Thank you for breaking that down for us. Everybody's holding out hope.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd be beyond shocked. And frankly, you can tell that Judge Merchan would be beyond shocked when he heard on Friday them saying, or Thursday saying, we might call a witness. He said, okay. Anyway, summation's Tuesday. It's like, obviously, if the defendant decides to testify, that'll be a game changer. It's not happening. So I don't think we should be engaged in sort of dangling that out as a sort of, stay tuned. I think the real issue is people getting ready for summations. Key thing to look at is the defense is going to be saying that Michael Cohen is an indispensable witness and that without him, you can't find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And he's obviously a very problematic witness. You knew that had nothing to do with the cross-examination. That had to do with just who he is and what he's pled to. And the government and state here is going to say there's just so much evidence and you have to look at all of it together. And the defense is going to be trying to say, look at it in isolation. That's a typical strategy. The defense wants you to look at each leaf and not see that there's a tree there with, a bushy tree with lots of evidence in it.
A bushy tree with lots of evidence. So, Lisa, we only have about a minute left, but you referenced Josh Steinglass has been preparing. I mean, his opening statement, what struck me even as a non-lawyer, is like he's been working on this. It's like outlined. It's so specific. It's so well constructed. It was really telling the story of the last couple of years, which was what was interesting to me. What are you expecting from his closing statement?
I'm expecting them, Jen, to play the ultimate game of connect the dots. So remember that as they've presented witnesses and testimony, it hasn't really followed a strict chronology. For example, Stormy Daniels came in at a time that didn't really cohere with the rest of the chronology. Here's where they're going to put it all together, and they're going to layer testimony and phone calls and emails and texts together to show you exactly how these deals came together, why Donald Trump was always a participant in the underlying conspiracy to elect him through unlawful means, and most importantly, that he approved of and caused others to make false business records, all 34 of them, in 2017 as he was coming up with a way to repay Michael Cohen, who at that point was no longer an employee of the Trump Organization and who therefore had to be paid through other means.